We begin with reactions to Iranian drone strikes on Israel over the weekend. An Israeli ally, the United States, has told Israel it will not be joining any retaliatory strikes on Iran. This was made known by White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby, who repeatedly said that the U.S. has made it clear to Israel it seeks to avoid a wider conflict, adding that Washington would continue to defend Israel but has ruled out participating in any Israeli response. U.S. President Joe Biden had urged Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to think very carefully and strategically about how his forces reply to unprecedented action. On Saturday night into Sunday morning, Iran launched more than 300 drone strikes into Israel in what it said was retaliation for a strike on its consulate in Syria that was bombed by Israel earlier this month. It was the first time ever that the country fired at Israeli territory. On Sunday, Iran warned Israel against retaliating against the strikes, but the Israeli government says it's up to Israel to decide how to defend its people. The Prime Minister's war cabinet is considering several options regarding its response. The United States is not the only country reacting to the Iranian attack on Israel. We've been hearing from the UK Foreign Secretary David Cameron, who said earlier 301 weapons were fired, including 110 ballistic missiles and 43 cruise missiles. He later said the number of cruise missiles fired was 36. And although the Iranian attack was very significant, it was a failure, according to him. Iran suffered a double defeat, according to David Cameron. Our G7 leaders have condemned the Iranian attack and reaffirmed full support to Tel Aviv. German and Jordanian governments have summoned their Iranian ambassadors, while the Iranian government has summoned the German, French and British envoys over how they responded to the attack. President Ibrahim Raisi said in a statement on Sunday, if the Zionist regime or its supporters demonstrate reckless behavior, they will receive a decisive and much stronger response. The sound of air raid sirens wailing in Jerusalem in the early hours of Sunday morning as Iranian drones and missiles entered into Israeli airspace. The drones were launched by Iran. Hundreds of them made their way towards Israel in Tehran's first direct attack on the Jewish state, signaling a major escalation of tensions in the region. The attack is Iran's response to an alleged Israeli airstrike on the Iranian consulate in Damascus, Syria, on April 1st, which killed at least 7 members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, including a senior Quds force member. Israeli Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant said in a video statement the IDF thwarted the Iranian attack on its territory in an impressive manner. Gallant has described Iran as a terrorist state whose true face the world is now seeing. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel is prepared for any attack from Iran, and it will exact a price from Iran as it weighs its response to the unprecedented overnight barrage of drones and missile strikes while facing international pressure to de-escalate. U.S. officials say President Joe Biden has made it very clear to Israel that he hopes to de-escalate tensions following the attack. They also say the U.S. will not participate in any Israeli offensive response. While Israel remains on high alert following the attack, it's been condemned by Britain, the European Union, and the G7, which have called for calm. Jordan has sought to de-escalate the tension, while militant group Hezbollah has congratulated Iran's leadership for its attack on Israel, calling it a wise decision. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has warned members not to further escalate tensions with reprisals against Iran, adding that the Middle East is already on the brink. He made this known at an emergency meeting in the United Nations Security Council in New York. He said it's time to step back as civilians are constantly bearing the brunt of the strikes.
The people of the region are confronting a real danger of a devastating full-scale conflict. Now is the time to defuse and de-escalate. Now is the time for maximum restraint. According to the latest reports, Iran launched hundreds of drones and missiles from its territory towards Israel, with most intercepted. Several missiles reportedly struck within Israeli territory, one of which damaged an Israeli military facility in the south of the country, and overall, a few civilians were injured. It's time to step back from the brink. It's vital to avoid any action that could lead to major military confrontations on multiple fronts in the Middle East. Civilians are already bearing the brunt and paying the highest price. And we have a shared responsibility to actively engage all parties concerned to prevent further escalation. We have a shared responsibility to work for peace. Regional and indeed global peace and security are being undermined by the hour. Neither the region nor the world can afford more war. Thank you.
Now, some locals in West Jerusalem have been expressing their thoughts on the escalating tensions between Iran and Israel. Some believe the crisis between both countries started years ago as they defended Israel, saying Iran is a big problem to the country. Others hope Israel will defend itself from more strikes and teach Iran a big lesson.
You know, the war with Iran started years ago. They've been firing missiles in the north for months. So, yeah, this came from Iran. Hezbollah missiles come from Lebanon, but Hezbollah really is a proxy of Iran. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I was in bed, like I think everyone. We go to the shelters around 2 a.m. We heard about those missiles that came to us from Iran. We don't know like exactly what's going on. Now we feel okay. We didn't go to the kindergarten. Like my daughter didn't go because all closed by the government. We know that Israel can't defend ourselves, and we felt okay. We just went after the instructions and made all okay. We want peace.
I hope that Israel give them some lesson. Yeah, some lesson that they're gonna understand who we are, and we are the great army in the Middle East. All the countries, not only Israel, have to make them a lesson, and that they can continue with this situation. Nobody.
Several African countries are calling on Israel to show restraint as its war cabinet meets to decide whether to retaliate against an unprecedented Iranian aerial attack on Saturday night. Iran carried out that assault in response to an Israeli airstrike on its consulate in Damascus on April 1st. The attack killed Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps officers. Saturday's assault on Israel involved more than 300 drones and missiles, the vast majority of which were intercepted, according to the Israeli military. Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa and Somalia have called for restraint to avoid further escalation in various statements released. The Nigerian Foreign Ministry urged Israel and Iran to reflect on the universal commitment to peaceful resolution of conflicts. Kenya's President William Ruto urged Israel to show utmost restraint, taking into account the urgent need for all parties to walk away from the brink, beyond which recovery will be enormously difficult. Somalia called on the international community to take swift and decisive action to to de-escalate the situation and reduce the risk of further conflict. While South Africa's Department of International Relations and Cooperation says all parties must exercise the utmost restraint and avoid any act that would escalate tensions in a particularly fragile region. At the Iran-South Africa Expo, delegates from both nations converged in Johannesburg to explore economic opportunities and foster stronger bilateral relations. But amid the discussions, tensions escalated dramatically on the global stage as Iran launched that attack on Israel. Our South Africa correspondent, Innocent Samosa, has more.
The discussion here is centered on trade, investment and cooperation in various sectors, reflecting a mutual commitment to deepen ties between South Africa and Iran. The South African government says the expo provided a valuable platform for networking and exploring potential business ventures.
Iran has been sanctioned for many years, but Iran is able to live within those sanctions. South Africa, if South Africa can learn to be able to be self-sustained, I think South Africa will be a great country.
However, amidst these diplomatic efforts, tensions reached a boiling point as Iran launched a bold attack on Israel. The Cultural Consular Embassy of the Islamic Republic of Iran in Pretoria, Saeed Mustafa, had this to say.
So from this kind of looking at the issue, anyone who does such a genocide, exile the people from their land, as it happened in South Africa in the time of apartheid, is totally condemned. And if we look at our essence as a human being, we reject it. No need to just look at the policy on two countries or the name of different countries to mention it, or what happened. So I think all people, all the population of the world should condemn what is happening nowadays in Palestine without considering who are the both sides. Oppressors should be condemned and oppressed people should be supported.
The United Nations Security Council is set to convene an emergency meeting to address the situation and seek avenues for peace. As tensions remain high, the international community watches closely, hoping for a swift resolution to prevent further violence and instability in the region. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Innocent Samosa, Channels Television News.
Let's discuss this really hot topic now. I'm joined by geopolitical analyst and U.S. war veteran, Major Adebayo Adeleke, from his location here in Lagos, and by Chairman, Guild of Public Affairs Analyst, Dr. Ambrose Igboke. He joins us from Enugu State in southeast Nigeria. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Welcome. Thanks for having me, Amachi.
I guess we'll start with the most pressing decision facing the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu right now, which is how to respond to Iran's drone strikes very early on Sunday morning. Israel claims to have knocked down 99% of the strikes with the help of allies, the United States. How do you think he should respond? Major Adeleke, I think I'll begin with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Amarachi, and it's such a great time to be alive to witness this in several ways. Because if you're a good student of history, you understand exactly what is going on. Nothing that is playing out, that has played out in the last 48 or 72 hours, has really surprised anyone. If I'm one of the advisors to Bibi, I would tell him to exercise restraint because this whole thing was predicated by them striking in Syria, which killed, and you also know that Iran knows its audience. Like one of my friends, Fidel Owusu, actually articulated, said Iran has been doing this for so long, and actually they understand their audience, which is the people, the Persian people that which they govern, and also they also understand the world at large. So they have to respond with force to show their to show their strength, and also they have to restrain as well to make sure that they don't stand their limitations in the world stage. So oftentimes, you see, actually it's not oftentimes, actually what actually transpired is that despite the technology in Iran, despite the high tech, that everything, they could believe that they weren't able to hit anything, and that's on purpose. And I believe all these things, or I mean, you might call me a conspiracy theory, but with my knowledge of what I know in geopolitical space, I believe this thing was well orchestrated to show resolve and also to show that they are not weak. Anything other than what has happened today, I believe, is a dress rehearsal. Anything that has happened on Saturday by Israel is going to escalate the matter beyond what anyone can imagine. So I think from what U.S. already said, that they are not going to be part of the retaliatory strike, and the rest of the world also saying the same thing as well. And I think Israel will take a clue from there and be restrained from doing anything other than what has already happened.
Right, Mr. Iboke, do you think that Israel should strike back with force?
It is a very intricate and delicate situation. The Iranian government, since the Shah Revolution of 1979, has continued to play what I call a spoiler role in the Middle East. They have abrogated to themselves some sort of messianic status where they think they are defenders of the Arabs, which is not true. When we go to the history of the Arabs and Israelis, we found out from 1948, when the state of Israel was declared, there's a lot of military wars that have been fought. Remember the Golan Heights situation, remember the Yom Kippur War, and so many other wars that have been fought. And the United States and the West were able to broker some kind of peace in the Middle East until the Shah Revolution came in 1979, where this Ayatollah Khomeini and other groups of people were able to enthrone some extremist values. And since then, it has been Saudi Arabia and Iraq, Kuwait, and some of these other have come down, and Egypt and the rest have been cooperating with the West and Israel. So there is some kind of relative peace in the last 30 years. But Iran is not comfortable with that peace in the Middle East. So it has continued to sponsor the Hamas, continued to sponsor Hezbollah in Lebanon, and continues to have Houthi rebels in Syria. So what they have done is to have this convergence of a convergence of a ring around Israel, trying to form a kind of precarious situation like Israel, which Israel is not comfortable with. So what has happened now is that there's a peace talk going on in Egypt. There are efforts to see whether they can bring Gaza war to an end. If there is peace in the Middle East, Iran will become insignificant. Iran will become dormant. So Iran does not want peace in the Middle East, because once peace comes into the Middle East, Iran will no longer have a spoiler role to play. So it is trying all its best to ensure that that region is always destabilized. And that is why it is making sure that it sponsors all the terrorist attacks that are happening, even going to international waters, using the Houthi rebels to, distort and disrupt, marine trade and others. And so these things, Israel should not respond by force now, because what Iran is trying to do is to escalate the war and make sure that partners, for example, if the war is escalated, we know that Russia is supporting Iran, and some other countries will also support Iran. And what we have is escalate this war, and it may have a conflagration that may lead us into Third World War, whatever it is, when allies start to realign and then fight the war. But it's good news that Israel, US has said they won't participate in any direct attack. And I don't think other countries will also do that, because it may lead to what the world doesn't want. But right now, Israel can deal with a lot of diplomatic and economic sanctions to strangulate Iran's capability to have access to funding. And this can be done through maybe cutting making sure that the other parts of the world do not buy Iranian oil. If they can persuade their partners not to buy Iranian crude and other things, it will greatly strangulate it. And then some of the partners of, it's unfortunate that Russia is also having issues with the West. If Russia was not having this issue, they will also join in to, force Iran to be able to, if they can force those sanctions, Iran will be stifled. But retaliating with military might right now might be what Iran is just looking for, because Iran just is setting a trap.
Right.
They know what they are doing. They want to provoke Israel to escalate this war, and then they'll come up all and then, throwing mud and trying to just spark fire anywhere they see. So it's like putting
because if you do look at if you do look at the way Iran has responded to what it says was a targeted attack on its consulate in Syria, you would know that this was just I mean this is like trying to use a sledgehammer to kill or just escalating the situation, drawing it out of proportion. The U.S., as you rightly mentioned, has said Israel has a right to defend itself. Even without the U.S. saying that, Israel does have a right to defend itself. It can retaliate with force if it wants. But the fear, as you mentioned, is escalation in the region, and then this war with Gaza, going beyond borders. It already has, because Israel has been, targeting Hamas militants even in Lebanon and even in Syria, going beyond its borders. Given the fact that Israel is fighting this war with Hamas, do you think that opening this new front with Iran would help Israel in any way? Major Adeleke, please.
I don't think as much. I don't think so as well, because you have to look at it from an economic perspective. Everything that is going on in the region is pretty much tied to petrodollar, the Gulf states. You can see most of them have been quiet, if not for Jordan, and a couple of other countries that have lent some support to the West to be able to assist in this particular situation. I don't think opening another front right now, it destabilized Gulf at a particular point in time in the global economic, in global economic state of things right now. It's not a good thing. As you can see, one of their biggest partner is China. Most of the economy, especially the oil trade, is actually most of China oil trade actually comes from the Gulf. So a destabilized Gulf region destabilizes China as well as some other countries in that corridor. So I believe, from what I'm hearing from the charters, I believe that a lot is going on to de-escalate the situation. And if you understand what goes on I haven't lived in that region for years myself, and if you understand what goes on in the diplomatic community, you understand that there are some certain words that were crafted in the press statement that tells you that from Iran's standpoint, this is just a show of force, and they're done. Unless Israel does play, they try to retaliate, and then this thing becomes a whole new ball game. But I think they've kind of tell the world that they've done their part, they've responded to what happened, and this is their response, and they don't expect anything further from there. And if you look at that press statement very well, I know it's not written in fine print, but for some of us that have been in this diplomatic and geopolitical space, we understand certain words are crafted in certain way to convey certain message to the world at large that this is what is going on. So, Palestinian war and conflict and the massacre that is going there is one thing entirely. Do not bring Iran in. It complicates the whole matter. So I believe that one should be resolved and should be resolved. Hence why Israel does not need to retaliate. And they just need to have some kind of show of face and tell their citizens as well. Because that's what Iran did in the face of this, that they have to respond. They have two audiences, the world at large and also their citizens. And they played it right. They responded, but they did not attack Israeli critical infrastructure that will have caused a lot of damage. So if you look at it from Iran's standpoint, it's well played, and Israel dodged a bullet. So and let's call it even that way, and let the world move on.
Yeah, Dr. Iwoke, you were going to add, your thoughts to this.
I align with his thoughts. There's a trap. Iran is setting a trap. And the trap is to escalate the war. So it's rather left for Israel, because the attitude of Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu is also similar to the attitude of the Iranian leaders. What they do, they want validation from their population, from their citizens. So they want to prove with the toughness of the regime. So you could see that Iranians were celebrating the attack on the streets. It was like a carnival for them. Same thing with Benjamin Netanyahu. He's trying also to impress his people, say that I'm a tough man. So it is more of an ego, diplomatic ego trip for both sides. First of all, strike on the 1st of April, striking that the consulate means that Israel has been striking targets. There's the Hezbollah targets, has been Hamas targets and the rest. But it going all out to now bomb the consulate of Iran, which means you have entered in the diplomatic circle, you have bombed Iran. That is the implication. When you bomb the consulate of any country, you have attacked the country. Now, Iran, in response, also heightened it a little by throwing rockets. Iran could have well retaliated by bombing Israeli, consulate in Syria or any other country in the Middle East. But it didn't do that. It went further to just throw rockets. And most of these rockets also, they know it didn't reach Israel. So it's like
but that's because of the Iron Dome anyway.
Yes, but the unfortunate thing is that all the wars, world wars and all the regional wars were always escalated by two stubborn leaders. Two leaders who believe in their ego and in their strength. Remember, Adolf Hitler caused the Second World War that caused conflagration. So it is always the ego, and it is now the partners of Israel should not stop at issuing press releases and press statements. They should actually go to the Benjamin Netanyahu and make sure that he doesn't retaliate with military, might, because that is what Iran is looking for, to escalate the war. Let the peace talk in Egypt continue. Let Iran have heavy sanctions to stifle it, and then let's see how the Gaza war can come to an end. I say it again, Iran has everything to gain if there is war in the Middle East, but they have everything to lose if there is peace in the Middle East. So Iran does not want peace in the Middle East.
I just want to quickly add this question, Dr. Ibuke. The response by African leaders, all of them asking Israel to show restraint and all of that. Your thoughts on this, because it appears, that, Africa is a bit jittery about what's going on in the Middle East, fear of an escalation, fear of being forced to take sides, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, apart from fear of being able to take sides in terms of diplomatic alliances, we are also talking about the proximity of the physical location. The Arab region is very close to Africa. I mean, through the Suez Canal, you have entered. I mean, we are so close. And so anything that tends to attack the Middle East and North Africa, MENA, where they call it, Middle East and North Africa, tends to, come into Africa. So we are too close. The Arab, North Africa and the Arabs in the Middle East are so close. Anything that happens there, there's a normal escalation into Africa. And sometimes these leaders are so smart, they try to color it with religious perceptions. And sometimes the people don't understand it, that these things have nothing to do with religion. It's just grab of political power, grab for space, grab economic power, nothing that has to do with religion. But these leaders cleverly, cover it with religion. And once it escalates, it comes down to Africa. And that is why the African leaders are trying to see that these things don't escalate, to de-escalate the matter by, pleading on Israel to not, do military attack. Because from anywhere it will come up, and Africa will be worst hit, because Africa is closest to the war zone.
Major Adebayo Adeleke, do you think that Africa is just trying to stave off, this war from reaching, the continent?
No, not really. I mean, anything that you see how Ukraine and Russia war has affected our food security in Africa. You see how a lot of skirmishes and conflict in any part of the world, if one country coughs there, it really affects the global chain. So, and just like the doctor said, the proximity of Africa to what is going on over there is quite close, and we share a lot of trade routes together with these folks. And anything that happens over there really will cause a lot of ripple. There will be a ripple effect in Africa and geopolitical space. And for theirs as real, I mean, they are actually sounding the alarm right now that everybody should cause, because if not, Africa doesn't have that kind of financial buoyancy that most of these Gulf states has. So, if anything happens that is quite detrimental to the trade or the economy of most African countries, it might take years, and months and years to actually recover. So I completely understand from their standpoint why they are sounding like, look, we need to exercise restraint here, regardless of who started it or not. An ability to restrain, despite you have the power to do certain things, is where leadership actually comes in, because a lot of people can do a lot of things when they have the power to do so. But ability to exercise that restraint is really what causes why people refer you as a leader in that particular space. And I think the Gulf region, which Israel is part of, is quite sensitive and at this point in time. So ability and I think both of them, I think Israel has a point at this. If they can actually exercise restraint on this point, I think they will gain a lot of empathy, which they've lost over the course of time with this Palestinian issue, and more importantly, I think there will be more objective view of Israel going forward, and I think they will gain some support going forward if they exercise restraint. But I don't know. Bibi is is an interesting figure, just like the doctor said. He's been kind of proving headstrong, and I sincerely hope that the U.S. already told him that. And it's also an election year for United States, so you won't be able to draw them much into combat, especially because President Biden also has some issues he has to deal with domestically. So he can't be drawn into any long, protracted war at this particular point in time. Ukraine is still there for him. So he already gave Bibi that, it's not, that certain things is not going to be tolerated. So let's see if this holds, and we can deal with Palestine issue as a separate issue and not to compound it with the Iranian skirmish.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. Geopolitical analyst and war veteran, Major Adiba Adeleke, thank you for joining us on the program. Dr. Ambrose Ibuke, thank you also for joining us on the program. Gentlemen, we hope you will join us again when we have a conversation like this.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Hundreds of protesters gathered in Tel Aviv on Sunday, demanding negotiations for a ceasefire in Gaza and the return of the remaining hostages being held by Hamas militants in Gaza. The protests were also reported in Jerusalem and other cities around the country, calling for early elections, the removal of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu from office, and a deal for the release of the hostages held by Hamas. Some local news outlets said 45,000 people at least protested in Tel Aviv and were still clashed with police in the course of the demonstrations.
I don't believe anything that Hamas said. This is the first thing. And I'm sure they know where most of the people, if not all of them, where they are. And if they want it, they can find anyone they want, because it's impossible that they said they don't know where the people is. It's not a 1 week after and no one knows what exactly is happening. After 6 months, they probably know where every one of the hostages there, at least the live one, and I hope also the dead one, so we'll be able to bring them back to be buried in Israel at the end. Our government could have done much more in order to bring them back, and we saw in the last week many news about it. And we hope that starting now they will change their position and start to do exactly everything possible in order to bring them back.
I think after 190 days, we have no choice but to talk and make a deal tomorrow. We've been talking to ourselves for too long, and we understand what the situation is. We understand what the dynamic is. We know who we are. Let's call it negotiating with, it is hardly negotiations. And let's just get down to we agree, let's start getting hostages home and work from there.
You know, I don't care what Hamas say. I don't care. I'm not negotiating with Hamas. I have a government and the best people in the IDF and Mossad and everything. They can negotiation. I don't care what Hamas say. I care that my government must release Tal and all the hostages. That's it. Let's let them to do the negotiation. I don't care what Hamas say.
There were also protests this time in the Netherlands. Demonstrators demanded an end to what they called an active genocide in Gaza. Protesters marched through the Dutch capital holding Palestinian flags and banners reading "Stop the Genocide" and ceasefire now.
Since last year, October, there's been an ongoing genocide, an active genocide in Gaza, with the forced starvation of the people, forced displacement. People are slaughtered every single day. There are more than hundreds and hundreds of children that are dying, that are underneath rubble. And today we're here, as we are every Sunday in Amsterdam, to say no to genocide and to make our voice heard for those who cannot be heard.
After 6 months and 75 years, we're marching and protesting against the occupation of Palestine, the unfair imprisonment of children, and the wrongful killing of innocent civilians in Palestine, and the occupation, Free Palestine. There's no access to healthcare, there is no access to medical needs, there is no access to sufficient aid, and it seems that human rights have failed the Palestinian people, and so we'll keep marching until they recognize our call.
I want to make awareness, and I want to spread awareness to everybody around, because this did not start on October 7th. This is not something that just magically happened. This has been going on for over 76 years, and even more than that, because Israel is a colonial state, is a settler colonial state. It's nothing other than colonialism and imperialism that has caused all of these problems. It's not even the Jewish people. The Jewish people are not our enemies. The Jewish people are our brothers and sisters.
For fundamental human rights, because we shouldn't be killing children. That's really it, because I don't think there is more I can say. It should be everyone here. It should be just basic human, I don't know, decency, awareness that's just not okay to do. Nothing, war, occupation, colonialism, imperialism, all these things, racism, are not fine to do.